I'm Jez Benton, and this is Route to the Top. I'll be meeting with a whole range of leaders who'll climb a mountain together and do a video podcast from the summit. I'm here on the top of Box Hill in the North Downs in Surrey with David Tait. David and I first met on an Everest expedition in 2005. In fact, we summited together. You're a 5-time Everest summiteer, linked to the charity work that you do, and you're the CEO of the World Gold Council. So I want to play around with all of that.
All right, let's start with the charity. The charity is the NSPCC, which is a National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. I'm closely aligned with the charity. I'm their, a prominent fundraiser, or I put myself into that position over the course of many years. I started raising money for the charity anonymously because of what happened to me in my childhood. And it was only much later in life that I disclosed what had happened, more or less synonymous with the time when I discovered Everest as a vehicle to raise money. You must remember I'm anything but a climber, and I just used the big rock as a convenient vehicle to raise tons of money.
Yeah.
The first climb I expected to raise £20,000. I raised 250,000. Hence that triggered 5 more climbs. Don't think for 1 minute I would have climbed it one more time if it hadn't been for that phenomenal amount of money.
Yeah.
That's how it happened.
It's amazing that because I've watched interviews of you before and stuff. You're very open. Like I'm not a mountaineer. I was not a passionate mountaineer. So there are many things you could have done to raise money. You could have done an ultra marathon. You could have done an Ironman. You could have, I don't know, jumped in freezing cold water every day for a month or something. Why?
Well, I had tried many things in the past, but people didn't tie it to the charity because there was no story.
Right.
I had been skydiving, base jumping, motor racing. I famously took out the championship leader at Brands Hatch one day, which I can share that clip with you if you'd like to see, in my novice road racing days.
We can get some B-roll. I'll
send that across to you. It's one of the most embarrassing moments of my life when you hear the commentator on Motors TV saying, "Oh no, David Tait's in the turnip field." I swear to God, he says that. And I've still got it for posterity. But I raised tons of money in incremental amounts doing various crazy things, including the marathons and all that. And then one day in 2003, I was sitting at my desk at a company called Blue Crest, and I looked up on the TV, and the Japanese or Chinese had got to the summit on the 50th anniversary of Hillary Tenzing.
Yeah.
And they broadcast live for the very first time, and it looked magical. And it looked absolutely breathtaking. And I remember looking up thinking, there it is. There's my next vehicle. And went and did it the following year, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. Only mountain I've ever climbed, which annoyed so many climbers.
Apart from Box Hill, you know.
Yeah, well, this is where all the training took place.
Yeah, that must be quite annoying to other climbers. I've got several friends who are mountaineers that have tried a few times and failed.
No.
And I mean, you know that luck has a lot to do with it, or at least the
timing. Luck
of the weather, timing, etc. You can go several times and fail through no fault of your own kind of thing. So yeah, five's impressive. I say I'm meeting somebody who's climbed Everest 5 times. Oh, there must be a guide or a Sherpa.
No, just someone with no life. I did actually try, obviously, 7 times.
Yes.
And 2008 was I had a bit of a disaster with my teeth, which I make up. It forms part of my NSPCC speech that I give on behalf. Half is a gory, funny Everest story of my failure,
right?
And the second half tells a story of my childhood. So I take people on a bit of a roller coaster. And I had to come home because I had 3 teeth removed on the mountain, and that was a mess. And then 2017, as I referred to earlier, which was an effort to try and get to the summit, Heathrow to summit to Heathrow in 30 days.
Yeah.
And we missed that by 2 days. But by then it had become a bit old.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't too disappointed to get on Qatar Airways and hold that glass of something by that point.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Blue Crest Capital. That was who you were working for when we met. Because I remember you standing on the summit with the Blue Crest Capital flag. Right. So they were obviously very supportive of that. So let's move away from Everest slightly and talk about career. So you started at Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
So you big banks, Goldman Sachs, CSFB, as it was back then. then into some smaller asset management firms, Blue Crest and...
Well, really, in big chunks, it was Goldman Sachs, CSB, as you rightly say, Blue Crest Capital for the vast majority. I spent a stint at 2.5 to 3 years at UBS at the end of that before rejoining Credit Suisse for what was the latter stages of my investment banking career. So I was lucky to see the very highs and the very lows.
Of it. And you're a trader?
At heart. I was a bad one.
It couldn't have been that bad.
I never really enjoyed it. I did okay. And the reason, funnily enough, I did okay, it was when I joined Goldman Sachs, it was an era when, I suppose, aggression was appreciated.
Right.
And I came into that world largely as a consequence of my childhood, frankly, not really caring whether I lived or died. I know it sounds all very dramatic, but I really didn't. And I walked into that job able to take much greater risks than others. I wasn't brighter at all, and I can prove that. But I was able to take chances that others weren't, and I didn't realise how I was at the time. And I was lucky, and when they paid off, but it wasn't because of cleverness. But that's how my trading career started. But what I really found most interesting was as I got older and I moved to Credit Suisse in the latter stages, was I ended up running businesses as opposed to running positions.
Yeah.
And so my positions were people.
Right.
And organising cost-income ratios and returns on capital and structuring businesses and recovering businesses. I love that.
So, because that's where I was going with the question, right? So you have the sort of people have the trader mentality, and then you go, oh, hold on a second, then running, and I went small business, we're running big businesses, now to running a whole business. Can you identify any moments of learning? Because my business is about learning, my business is about leadership. That's a evolution of you as a leader within those organizations. So you found that you loved it, but moments of learning, like when did light bulbs go off? Oh, actually, this is different, and I'm good at it, and I've learned along the way. I
think the self-discipline I learned as a trader. Because if there's one lesson from my trading I sort of regret, but it's helped me too, is the fact I was very, very good at cutting losses.
Right.
Brilliant at it.
Yeah.
To the extreme.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately meant that I never really ran my profits enough. And there's always a quid pro quo.
Right.
But if I had to err on the side of, that gave me longevity.
Yeah.
Whereas some traders are there for a moment and go, or phenomenally successful and vanish, I was consistent. And so that ability to analyse and gut instinct, or a cross between instinct and I suppose intelligence in some respects, I was able to judge when things were going right or wrong, and it gave me a sixth sense. And I was not afraid as a consequence to make very, very difficult decisions that some people were somewhat reticent to do. And that sort of steered me into positions of authority. I was able to execute, I was able to get stuff done and see through to a goal.
Right.
Other people would get bogged down in the weeds. I was able to keep my head at 40,000 feet. Largely, it's trading mentality. Where's the profit? Focus on it. Don't get distracted.
Right.
No matter what, which is sometimes not an enviable trait in a human being.
Yeah.
Because you leave collateral damage around you.
Yeah.
But it's finding that balance is difficult.
Yeah, it's transferring learning from one part of a job or a role and taking it into another. I mean, cutting a position's pretty easy because it doesn't involve a person other than you. It's a position, it's money, it's whatever it is. How about managing and leading people? How do you manage that?
It was interesting. I gave a speech relatively recently to Judge Business School to 300 MBAs, and many of them. The speech on leadership I gave, I always encourage, has a bit of Everest in it because they like that story, it's engaging. But really what I've learned throughout my career is you need to lead as a person. And I don't mean this to sound trite, but it's very easy to manage, but it's very difficult to lead. Right. And I've found, at least in my experience, leadership is a personal quality. It's an ability to put others first, ability to put yourself into a detrimental state, sacrifice yourself for a common good. And it's in that respect that you get people respect you and follow you. I always, the old Henry V speech. They all knew they were going to die, but they followed him because he inspired them, and it was a uplifting. He was a true leader.
Right.
The logic of the situation dictated, no, I'm going home, thank you, Henry.
Right.
But they didn't.
They didn't. Yeah.
And I think there have been many situations throughout my career where, having demonstrated, I suppose, wearing my story on my sleeve garners a degree of respect from people,
Yeah.
I've noticed.
Yeah.
But when it's come to difficult situations at work, I've not shied away from them. And I've always been terribly honest with why I've made those decisions. I try and not sit in an ivory tower.
Yeah.
Try and take people with you.
Yeah, I think, you to me are probably one of the most transparent people I know. And when we were talking about this on the hike up, the last time we saw each other was, probably 6 years ago. I know we spoke, a year or so ago as I had changed my role, and you were a year or two into the World Gold Council. But your ability to just kind of click into a relationship and be very open and very transparent is amazing to me. I was just like, wow. So when did that? Because that wasn't early in life for you. It was the complete opposite. So when did that?
I know exactly when that happened. Yeah. Back in 1993 of all times, I reached a very pivotal moment in my life where I ended up standing atop a cliff, debating whether I was going to jump off that cliff. Lots of things had happened, and I was rescued by some policemen, you could say. In that aftermath, I decided that what had happened to me in the past was not going to dictate the future anymore. Otherwise, all I was doing was further acquiescing to the very people who had done that to me. So I needed to fight back. And in that moment, I decided to use that story.
Right.
And in doing that, in giving speeches for my charity, it helped me in my work because I became an advocate of helping, tried to. And with that decision comes a necessity to be forthcoming. You must, otherwise there's no point. Once I made that decision to wear that story on my sleeve, I became a bit of a beacon to some people who were not able to do it.
Yeah.
And I found that I was able to gain the trust of people in my business career and who work for me and with me, who were in turn very forthcoming. And that built a terrific rapport and a degree of trust that I think is critical if you're going to lead a successful business. And I keep using the word lead as opposed to manage.
Yeah.
Any idiot can manage something.
Yeah.
Just give them a set of rules and authority, as we know. You only have to walk into a doctor's surgery and you know what that authority can be abused.
Exactly, yeah.
Or there's taking people with you so they feel like peers.
Yeah. How I want to get onto World Gold Council as a business. I'm fascinated by it. But one last question. I remember the first time I watched. We'd spoken about your childhood and you were writing the story. I think while we were on Everest, you were thinking about writing a screenplay, etc. We never really got into it in detail. I watched, a few years later, you did an NSPCC talk. You were in a tux at a podium, and it's probably 4 or 5 minute, very succinct, very powerful talk about your life, your childhood, and why you do what you do. I would choke up myself in my throat, and my eyes would well, and I rewatched it prior to coming and doing this, and I had the same reaction to it. So, with that level of transparency, do people, do you notice people like struggle hearing some of that, or do they have a different reaction? Like how people's reactions must be very interesting when they get to know you.
It's the speeches I give sometimes are at the same time some of my best moments and worst, all combined into one. I've not been able to get that speech out of my mouth with my mouth remaining moist.
Right.
Not once. In 10 years of doing it now. I find that the satisfying thing about that speech is people come up to me afterwards and very discreetly either whisper in my ear, well done or fantastic, that's fine. But most often I get people coming up and saying, thank you for doing that. I could never, and I've never told anybody, but the first time is when they whisper in my ear. And that's very moving, and I find it intensely motivating to actually do it. I wrote that speech once, in one go, and I've never changed it.
Wow.
And I do it. I spell it out very slowly, methodically. I take the view that less is more, and I let people ponder each line as I work my way through it.
Right.
But please, but there's also a cynical aspect to it, because I do start with a 10-minute Everest story where I have them rolling in the aisles laughing, and I completely, in turn, flip it on its head and catch people off guard. Totally intentionally.
Right.
Because they park me just before the auction.
Yeah. Very good.
So there's method in the madness. I take them on this really high roller coaster. They're rolling around. They've all had tons of champagne.
Yeah.
And then I sucker punch them.
But your life has been a roller coaster.
It certainly has.
So if you can get that, across to an audience in a short period of time, join me on my roller coaster for half an hour.
It's been very effective. 15-minute speech, and they've said something like, if you added the monies raised in those speeches, it's £3 or £4 million. But that's not directly linked to me, obviously.
Right. But and you're an MBE?
I was MBE. Yeah. I was lucky enough to receive that 2012, I think, after. Was it 2010, 2012? I can't remember.
Right.
Wonderful day at Windsor Castle when I met the Queen. Still to this day, one of my funniest moments was I went up in front of her, and you're told to put your toes against this little box that she stands on so she can reach.
Right.
You have a little hook on your lapel, and she reaches forward, and you shake hands. And she reaches forward and puts this on my lapel, and she reaches forward and she says, "What's this I hear about 3 crazy summits of Everest?"
Wow.
This was when I'd done 3, and I said, "Oh, well, I'm raising money for the charity." And she says, "So I hear." And she says, "So you be very careful in future."
Wow, she'd done her research.
And she was actually, the main part of the story was she was not prompted to say that.
Right.
By the person standing behind her with a big book.
Right.
No, I noticed that she was unattended to as I walked up. And then the significance is the coronation was that day.
Right.
So I think in her little briefing note, there's Everest, and it sort of stuck in her mind. I was very flattered. Yeah.
Excellent.
Terrific day.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Fantastic. Right, well, let's talk about the World Gold Council. I had never, ever...
Neither had I.
You know where I go. Heard of them. Until I saw, on your LinkedIn profile or somewhere that, your job had changed, and I started to do a little bit of research. So tell us about the World Gold Council.
Yeah, well, I left investment banking in 2016 and a half, and of my own free will, I'd done 35 long years. And in those intervening 18 months between investment banking and the World Gold Council came the film. Real luck. It fell into that gap.
Right.
More luck than judgment. And then this company called the World Gold Council approached me, and I was a bit bemused because I had run the commodities business at Credit Suisse and had never heard of them either.
Right.
Which is sort of embarrassing. And I closed down the commodities business at Credit Suisse, interestingly enough. But luckily, I kept the gold part of it.
Right.
More luck than judgment as well.
Okay.
Anyway, the World Gold Council is a representative body of all the gold miners in the world, all the major ones at least.
Right.
And the World Gold Council, when I took over, was somewhat fragmented and siloed, and didn't really have much of a mission.
Right.
I thought it did, but it didn't. It's funded by 2 of the world's largest ETFs. GLD and GLDM are the tickers, and between them have probably $75 billion under management. And it's that basis point fee that we spend promoting the gold industry. Now, we've gone from promoting the gold industry to something that's far more broad, and I'm now proud of, which it breaks into 3 main categories: sales, research, marketing.
Yeah.
The second one is all things standards and ESG. And the third one is government policy and market structure. And it's the departure from market structure most recently that I'm super proud of. So BAU, very busy. We have a huge budget, and we spend judiciously. But it's the structural changes to the market, global world market, that I'm most proud of.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, ties back to my childhood in a crazy way.
I hadn't thought about that.
It does. It's the gold market, if you had to characterize it, is still very 1985 compared to interest rates and currencies and equities, very. And so when I took over, I was asked to open the institutional world to gold. How?
Right.
Go on, David, sort this out.
Yeah.
And I knew very much it was because it was slightly old-fashioned, hence had many restrictions imposed on it as an investment vehicle.
Right.
High capital restrictions.
Yeah.
How do you unpick that? Trust, transparency, etc. Very simple equation. That breeds participation and demand. It's a simple equation. So, most recently, on the 28th of March this year, we announced, after a lot of hard work, a year of really hard work, a mine site to ring on your finger database for all gold. All gold will go into this database such that it can be tracked on a DLT ledger, and you can, newly mined gold goes into this, all central bank gold will go into it, all the good delivery lists around the world will go into it.
Yeah.
So a person can look it up and make sure it is what it is, where it's came from, what its provenance is, chain of custody, integrity, for the first time in history.
In history, wow.
Now, that's one strand I'm very proud of, and we've launched it, and that was the 28th of March. Alongside that is a new technology that can mark the molecular structure of gold with your name. Jez Benton, date of birth, can be coded into the gold using a rare earth metal combination.
Wow.
Doesn't change it. So imagine your name running through the gold alongside this database. My long-term goal is to create an ecosystem that is closed and immutable, such that nefarious practice loses its market.
Loses its value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So people who have it under their bed for tax reasons, or criminal enterprises, or wait for it, the exploitation of children in mines will become extinct over time because there will be no market for it.
Right.
So
that's
from early beginning 3 years ago, that's where we are now in the World Gold Council, and it's something I'm rather proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a lot of change. It sounds like the mandate was to bring it into the...
To shake it up.
Shake it up.
But amusingly, somebody said to me, I was in Cape Town week before last at the Indaba meeting, somebody said, "Magnificent, David." He said, "But doesn't that make you a marked man?"
Yeah, that's right.
Hadn't thought of that, but thanks for bringing it up.
Need to cut some of that budget for personal security moving forward.
Yeah, that's right.
But so we so this week is last week was a big crypto crash. I work with two crypto clients. I work with Galaxy Digital and BlockFi. So I've been on the peripheral edges of that. What's that done to gold in the last week or two?
Well, interestingly, at the beginning of the Ukraine invasion, you had a massive divergence between, let's say, Bitcoin, some cryptos into Bitcoin for argument's sake, and gold. They went in completely opposite directions. And frankly, I wouldn't have believed that crypto would have fallen with other risk assets like equities. I thought it was going to be the differentiator. This would be its differentiating moment.
The opposite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it actually went straight down the pan with all equities, and gold went up in a straight line, much to my pleasant surprise. So going forward, I think in portfolios, if you're going to hold regulated crypto assets, as I think they will be one day, or they'll become extinct, one of the two things, be regulated out of existence. If you're prepared to have that degree of risk in your portfolio, it lends itself to having gold as well, because they are diverse and they regulate each other, depending on your risk appetite, of course. But there's a place for both in portfolios and in the trading world. I do think that it's going to be heavily regulated. I think it's going to be squeezed out of existence and I think they're going to do that before there's a systemic risk attached to it.
Right.
The assets under management are vast at the moment, but not so vast that it's going to upset the world or tilt the world off its axis. But the authorities will act before it does that. But there's a place for gold and a place for crypto. I know crypto came out and tried to undermine gold's place. Drop Gold campaign by Grayscale 14 months ago.
Right, okay.
Well, we didn't get down in the mud and start fighting with them. We just said, well, these are the reasons you should own gold. Good luck to crypto. Yeah. And that's the way it's turned out. They can coexist.
Yeah, excellent. So the World Gold Council, obviously shaking the place up, new strategies, a lot of visibility. I mean, from a marketing standpoint, I don't know whether it was ever like that. Maybe it's because I'm connected to you and stuff gets pushed my way, but certainly much more visible, modern organization. Talk to me about leading the people through that? What have you had to do over the last 3 years from leading the team at the World Gold Council?
Well, I'd say that's been the most challenging part.
Yeah.
Because coming from Credit Suisse, and with all due respect to the culture of Credit Suisse, people were pretty much items, numbers. Taking things to extreme.
Sure.
But I didn't have the time to literally consider feelings too much. That sounds very draconian. It's not quite that bad. But by comparison to running a relatively small organisation of 70 people, just notwithstanding our assets, it's a small organisation, which means you know everybody intimately. And what comes with that is all their problems and all their concerns and self-interest and legitimate sometimes, but often not.
Yeah.
And it becomes a little bit overwhelming sometimes and distracting. But you have to take them on the journey. And I pedal at a remarkable speed, and I try not to put people off, but I do expect people to keep up.
Right.
And that's been a little bit difficult for some, because I've moved it from a sleepy organisation into something that's got a pace.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't teach old dogs new tricks. And so there's been a reasonable turnover over time, as I've tried to raise the bar. But now I've got some quality individuals, smart. We're not shy of paying. And so I'm able to raise the standard of individuals. But it's, again, I'll come back to one thing. It's about, I believe it's respect for the mission, and it's respect and belief in the person that will always turn an organisation into a success. Cost-income ratios are easy to figure out. Any idiot can do math. But driving it to success is an everyday, 24-hour effort by the person in charge. It all comes from the top.
So when you talk about things like mission and vision and stuff, what do you do to drive that on a daily basis, weekly basis? Like, how do you get those messages across? How do you lead them?
Constant contact with the individuals.
Right.
As many times as I can. There's calls, there's town halls, there's minor meetings, there's random calls that you send where you text someone or you get them on Teams, catch them off guard, not deliberately, but you don't have to diarise stuff. You can randomly reach out. You're constantly explaining the same things, because I'm at the hub of the wheel. They are at the end of the spokes. So they're only seeing small proportions of what the big picture is. And you have to acknowledge that. You have to understand that. And you've got to make every single part of your ecosystem feel important.
Right.
Otherwise you're lost. So that you've got to make them realise that none of the machine will work unless every piece, every component's in the right place. Otherwise they become demotivated. So reminding people of the good we're doing. Back to my story about, for instance, that our grand vision is this.
Yeah.
Everybody's valuable, and then constantly contacting them all the time. It's a constant effort to take them with you. Yeah. Much harder than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Much more time than you thought it would be.
And totally unnecessary at Credit Suisse, because it's all about money.
Right.
This is different.
Interesting. Very interesting. So I'm gonna take us back very quickly and do a combo World Gold Council Everest connection. You have a Guinness World Record.
I wonder whether you know. Yes, I did. Yeah, I do. When I first joined the World Gold Council, I was invited to visit the deepest mine in the world at the time, and it still is actually, Maponeng in South Africa. And I went down the very bottom of this mine, which was 4,100 meters underground, and I stood at the bottom and had a few photos taken. It was a fascinating experience. But in the back of my mind, I knew that having got that photograph, I knew they were going to close that level of the mine and bring it up, because it's become economic to go any lower.
Right.
So I've got the photograph at the lowest point, forever now.
Yeah.
Of course, if you add 8,850 meters to 4,100 meters, that's the highest, I don't know what you call
polar part
that you can get, other than the Mariana Trench. And someone's done that, incidentally enough, at Everest summiteer, but they're also costing $50 million to achieve. And I'm not prepared to spend that much money. I was very proud of it. I came back, and my son and I went through the tedious process of verifying it from the Guinness Book of Records, but I got my certificate in the end. It's one of my favourite books as a child. That's
so good.
Guinness, I used to every Christmas.
I was trying to remember the name of the guy when we were kids that had the TV show. Was it? What was his name?
Oh, yeah.
The Guinness Book of Records.
Ross McGuirter. The twins.
Yeah.
I can't remember the
And
main.
every week
person.
they'd come on and
Yeah,
there'd be a
read
little
facts. I
read
loved
facts
it,
out
mate.
of the book.
It was the two things at Christmas was the Argos catalogue.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
And the Guinness Book of
Yeah.
Records.
Norris. Yeah, it was Norris.
Norris and Ross McWhirter.
Yeah, that's
How about
it.
that?
Yeah.
How about that?
Good memories.
Yeah. And the Victor annual, or the Beano annual, that was my Christmas presents. The Guinness Book of Records every year.
Fantastic. Love it. Right, I got some short, quick fire questions for you. So see if you can do a 1 or 2 word or short
Try my
sentence
best.
answer. And some of them you've already answered, but I'm gonna laser in. What distinguishes you from others?
My past.
What did you need to change about yourself to get to the top?
Listen to people. To listen to people.
To listen to people.
Yes. I was very good at A to B, route 1. But to manage an organisation, I needed to start listening.
How do you learn?
I think I'll take you back to the last answer. And I found that when I came into the World Gold Council, it was implicit. I had to listen to as many people before I started opening my mouth, until I was confident that I could earn their respect by the things I was going to say. I have seen people, incidentally, do the opposite.
Right.
Start talking in positions of authority before they've learned and have earned the respect to start talking. And that's destroyed their careers.
Yeah.
So listen as long as you can before you start talking.
Interesting. So that would be that's a mistake that you see other
Yes.
people make.
Overconfidence or a bit of hero worship or
Right.
excluding people they don't
I've got a
value.
big job, so
I've
can
got to
come
start
in.
leading from day one.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that. You can sit and listen and earn their respect by listening, such that when you do start saying stuff, it resonates with them.
Biggest mistake you've made in the last 12 months?
Biggest mistake I've made in the last 12 months. Hitting a send all, reply all, mail.
The dreaded reply.
It was a reply all. I remember it now. It was the vivid, most horrific moment. I can't go into detail, but
Sure.
it was a surname of someone was the same as someone who worked in my organisation. And I was working too fast, and I hit reply all, and I sent it to the person who I was criticising.
Got it.
Yeah, big mistake. So don't use reply all.
Don't
unless
use
you've
reply
studied.
all.
Honestly, I aged 10 years when that happened.
I've had a few experiences of those, a few client ones, where one of our sales guys had a great meeting, had gone really well, came back, sent an update about the meeting. It said, great meeting, they loved us, they got loads of money, had a meeting out of the palm of our hands, this is going to be great, send.
I know.
And it was the dreaded reply, or went to the client, and the client very funnily emailed back and said, yes, we do have lots of money, but now you're not getting it. It was like, God,
I did. I think my worst one of all time was when I left investment banking. I did interview with one other investment banking firm just to see what would happen, or they asked me. And it was a great meeting, and I met at the Mandarin Hotel. And as I left there, I jumped in the taxi to go home, and I texted my wife, it was brilliant, love you. And he texted back, I love you too.
Love you too.
I'll be in touch. It's awful. Thank God I didn't say anything about it. Anyway.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So another quick one. How do you stay energetic? How do you stay in it? Like what sustains you, I guess, is the question.
Fear of boredom.
Fear of boredom.
Yeah. I think on Everest, and I learnt that it wasn't the climbing I found difficult.
Right.
With all due respect to people, I found that a cinch. What I found incredibly difficult was being on that mountain, in that tent, in those hours and hours and hours of tedium. I found that extremely difficult. Yeah. And then when I left investment banking in late 16, notwithstanding the film, I had periods I had nothing to do. And I realised in that moment I was never going to retire, because that desperation of being irrelevant and not engaged is far worse than working. And so my biggest fear, the thing that will one day kill me, is boredom.
Is boredom.
I hate it.
Yeah.
So load me up, keep going. I've got bandwidth. When I hear these people, I haven't got enough bandwidth, I haven't got any more bandwidth, rubbish.
Right.
There's room.
There's room. Well, my next door neighbour, so I live in Connecticut. When we bought our house 13 years ago, we were looking around the house. My next door neighbour wandered over. Uncle Ted, as he's now known as. We bought the house because of Uncle Ted. He was 83, 84 at the time. Gave us his business card in European giftware. We went to his retirement party last year at 96.
Good
This
for him.
guy has a better social life than I do. Unbelievable and he's just.
My advice to anybody: don't retire.
Don't retire.
It's awful.
Yeah,
I did it. It's dreadful.
But you've been able to balance time though. So life's not all about work.
No, it's not. You can make time for anything. There's lots of great stuff you can do. You can always fit stuff in, but there's nothing worse than staring into space. And I, for 35 years in investment banking, I dreamt of the day I could say, I'm done. And I did it.
Right.
I walked beaches literally for 6 months with no phone. Wonderful. And 6 months and one day I went, now what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so my recommendation is never put yourself in that situation. It's not as nice as you think.
It sounds like you're loving the World Gold Council and the role
I'm really
and the
enjoying
challenge
it
and the
because,
people.
the raw challenge and the scale of what we're trying to do is inspiring me, and I believe inspiring others, and it's realistic. I really am achieving those things. It's not pie in the sky. The ultimate huge change might post-date my time on this planet, but I've set it in motion now, and I know it will pay off. Those bad people are going to suffer, and I'm proud of that.
Nice. I
love
love
a
it.
fight.
Love a fight. Fantastic. All right, well, let's wrap it up there. I think you mentioned the movie a little bit. So Sulphur White is the name of the movie.
Sulphur White, it's a global release.
Yep.
The only platform I wasn't able to get it on was Sulphur White. Netflix.
Netflix, okay.
Got it on everything else. I even went to Reed Hastings, and for some reason it wasn't working. I tried everything.
Wow.
But I'm very proud that I managed to get it in every country. It's really, any proceeds, and all proceeds go to the charity.
Yeah.
But mostly it's meant to be an aid for people who have been abused, and also the people who live with them, either knowingly or unknowingly. To give them some solace that they're not alone out there. And I'm super proud of it. Never imagined that would ever happen.
I remember a conversation with you. I think we were in London having dinner one night, and that you'd written it, and it was being touted around, and we were debating who would play you. Are we going to do it? Is it going to be Brad Pitt? Is it going to be this? We were waxing lyrical about who would be the right person for David Tait. But it was a great movie. I mean, I've watched it.
It's somewhat. I mean, the 2 weeks in South Africa where I watched my childhood being played out by Dougray Scott, my father, who was perfect.
Yeah.
And Anna Friel played my mother, and little Hugo Stone, who played me, were the most amazing 2 weeks of my life, without any exaggeration. Changed me as a person.
Well, why?
I needed, once the film started to take shape, I needed to get it finished. I had to. For me, that was the end point of this whole journey. I needed to get it out there as a means of giving two fingers up at those people in my past.
Yeah.
I had to win.
Yeah.
I had to get it done. So I could turn around and sort of in my mind say, see, I won in the end. Yeah. That's what I had in my head.
Right.
And so those 2 weeks of living my childhood again, and having it played out on the floor of that storeroom in front of my eyes was tough.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I went through highs and lows that I've never experienced, which in itself was hugely intoxicating.
Yeah.
And I miss, ironically. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you learn about yourself in that moment?
Don't be afraid of my emotions.
Okay.
Because through the ups and downs of my life, I've sometimes taken stuff to moderate that don't.
Right.
Accept the highs and lows. That's what being human's all about.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as it says,
Yeah.
but that's the fun of life. Yeah? Even the bad times are living.
Yeah.
And if you erase those extremes of emotion, you're missing out on something. And I fell in love. I did everything. In those 2 weeks was the most incredible, and it came to fruition. The film was created.
Yeah.
I feel a lot better. I beat them in the end.
Yeah.
And that's how I choose to see it.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
Thanks, man.